Welcome, everybody. I think it would be great if we just quickly go down the line and everyone on the panel can introduce themselves, and then we'll move on to a couple of topics. So over to you, Kristina.
Hi, my name is Kristina Prokop. I am one of the co-founders of eyeota, data audience targeting company.
Hi, I'm David Goddard, Global Head of Programmatic Trading at BBC Global News Limited.
My name is Ilona, and I work as a Client Services Director in our London office, and I'm part of the trade desk team there.
Hi, my name is James Prudhomme. I head up International for Index Exchange.
Hi, I'm Romain Job, and I'm in charge of product at Smart.
Hi there, I'm Ryan. I head up media activation at Essence, remit for EMEA, based out of London.
And so, just my other job, apart from my IAB work, is working for Oath as well, leading our programmatic sales efforts across Europe. So we're going to start with what are the main trends in the programmatic industry. I think the IAB research that came out at the start of this year showed by the end of 2016, we'd reached the tipping point with 50% of investment in digital investment being programmatically driven. So what's driving that investment, but also what's restricting it? And we're going to try and answer that from a couple of perspectives. So I'm going to go to Ryan first and ask from an advertiser and agency perspective, what's really fueling that growth, but also what's constraining it at the same time?
Sure. In terms of fueling the growth, I would say the single biggest factor is the effectiveness of delivering measurable business outcomes for our clients. Year on year, we consistently see the programmatic space as being increasingly effective at delivering measurable outcomes in both brand and the DR spaces. I think the keyword there is measurable. There's an increasing appetite for being able to track the effectiveness of media and tie that to a long-term business outcome, whether it's a brand KPI or a revenue outcome. And in terms of constraints, there's a couple I'd probably call out. Number one being brand safety is something which comes up incredibly often. Platforms are very good, but they're very far from perfect, and there's a number of things that we need to be mindful of in how we run campaigns, and at times that can be a little bit limiting. And
Ilona, from a DSP point of view, from a customer point of view, what do you
Sure. So I think what's driving investment in programmatic for brands and agencies, that obviously there are many factors, but I wanted to call out two. I think one is the control the brands and marketers have over where the ads are being exposed, when, and who sees them. So that's one. And another one, I think, which is quite important, is the ability to serve programmatic across so many different channels. So going back to the control, I think, looking back at direct buys or IO buys, it is quite restricting. We don't have that control. And when we take, for instance, when we look at, so what we're essentially doing is we are going to a publisher and asking, hey, we want to buy this amount of inventory on this specific site from Monday to Friday. So it's like going to a supermarket and saying, hey, Mr. Cashier, this is my €50. Give me the products that you've got. And obviously every single product has different value. So I think what programmatic gives you is the ability to control that, to evaluate every single impression and pay for that impression the right price. And you can assess how much that impression is worth to you. And obviously the ability to run campaigns across multiple channels is pretty amazing. So going from serving ads like native to display to video, and even when I look back 4 years ago at the trade desk and what we used to run, it was mainly display. But now, looking what we're running currently, it's pretty amazing. We, video and mobile have overtaken massively display advertising. So it just shows how far we got. And I think this is definitely something that stimulates the growth in programmatic. And what's restricting it, I think in my eyes, is the fragmentation. And I'm sure that majority of us in this room is familiar with the famous Lumenscape of our industry. And even if I print it out, when I look at it, when I have it on a massive screen, it's still hard to make any sense out of it. So putting ourselves into brands' shoes is just so hard to make the sense out of what programmatic is about. And I think if we want help to educate brands and help them understand what every single player does, that's something that will be restricting us.
And David, coming to you as the publisher on the panel, how's it changing your publisher business, or what's the opportunity and what's the impact? Because some of those positives are fantastic, but they create some challenges as well, right, on the publisher side.
I do, but we've always had challenges in digital and we've always overcome them, and I'm sure we're going to be talking about some of the upcoming challenges shortly. But we've seen significant growth in programmatic at the BBC globally, including in markets such as Germany for us, and it's been mainly driven by programmatic direct, and that's been heavily propped up by programmatic guaranteed. So we've seen 50% year-on-year growth this year, last year compared, or financial year compared to year before, on programmatic guaranteed. This is touching on a couple of points actually, which we've seen. Well, it's been working with Essence in some of these areas, like programmatic guarantee with audience lists or audience guaranteed has certainly brought in greater efficiencies for advertisers, clients to reach their objectives, especially in brand advertising. So this heavy shift of brand advertising has come over into programmatic space. And this has brought in greater efficiencies than direct reservations. So one would say programmatic guarantee with audience lists or audience guaranteed, the solutions that many of these tech providers on this table or on this panel are offering should see that direct shift or see the direct revenue shift quickly over to programmatic. There is a fundamental problem that's been around since programmatic guaranteed was launched, which is the fees, the cost of serving it. The greater efficiencies achieved in programmatic guarantee with all these new tech features is justifying the additional fees, but I do think something needs to be addressed in our industry where we reduce the barriers of entry. I mean, procurement in these clients will not see, the justification on the increase on CPM to move that budget over. If we do address that over the next couple of years, reducing the value chain, making it more efficient in cost and targeting, I think we'll see a significant shift and growth.
And I think we may come back to programmatic guarantee just in almost the what's next, because it's a really interesting topic. What does it mean? It can mean a number of different things. I will definitely talk about transparency as we go, and we'll talk about cost and fees. I think, for me, one of the really interesting things is trying to be clear about what we mean about transparency. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the IAB Europe's work, and actually, David and I participated in creating a guide to transparency. And I think there are elements within that conversation about, do you mean transparency of cost or transparency of inventory source? Some of the barriers you threw up about brand safety also fit into this space. I guess, James, from a platform perspective, and Romain, from a platform perspective, what are you guys seeing as both the growth driver and the challenge?
I think the growth driver, Ilona mentioned control, and I think control is a really important aspect of it. Another way to think about control is decisioning, right? So if you're a brand or a buyer and you're purchasing impressions through an insertion order today, it's the ad server that decides which impressions you get allocated. If you then move that spend into, programmatic guaranteed, programmatic direct, programmatic insert your sort of buzzword there, you then move decisioning out of the ad server and into your DSP, right? Where all of your data lives, where all of your analysis can come to effect, where all of the things that you do as a marketer can actually have value, right? It's, I know, been frustrating for a lot of marketers over the years to say, hey, we have these great audiences that we've spent a lot of time and effort developing. Now we're going to try to push them into the ad server, and we're just going to cross our fingers and hope that, heaven meets earth and that one of those impressions reaches the audience member that we're actually looking to reach. So that's all changing, and that's changing really, really fast. So I would say that decisioning is one of the key drivers of it. From an adoption point of view, and certainly looking at it from the publisher's perspective, the fees, as David mentioned, very, very important. But also just the paradigm change, right? Guaranteed orders in the ad server were easy to forecast. You knew how much money you were going to make every month. You knew whether you were going to hit your numbers. Marketers moving those buys into DSPs also means they can hit the pause button anytime they want. And so that's a little bit frustrating for a publisher, and that sort of fear of the unknown. But that's starting to change, and people are starting to overcome that.
And it's an interesting thing about value being delivered as well, right? And so actually, where is the value being found? Value sold, is that the value that's then found through the campaign as well? Sorry.
Well, I would just say that arguably from a publisher perspective, moving those buys into a sort of auction-based environment and a transaction-based environment should mean that prices go up that buyers are willing to pay more for exactly the impressions that they want, as opposed to paying for a bunch of impressions that maybe they didn't really want in the first place. So that sort of gets averaged out into the price. So if you give the buyer the opportunity to only pick and choose exactly what they want, they should be willing to pay more for that, which means that the publisher should receive more on the other end.
And I think you guys mentioned cost a couple of times in a number of different ways as well. Some of that cost is actually some of the things we're seeing changes where the work's done. So it used to be done at the publisher side. The publisher used to do all of that work in terms of optimization, management, and delivery. Right now, that work is shifting to the DSP and the agency, and so that's changing where some of the costs mix change. And sometimes I think one of the debates around transparency is always around, you know, people are providing services, and there is a cost to those services. We'll talk a little bit about header bidding later. Header bidding is something that has brought massive benefit in terms of access to inventory, but massively increased infrastructure cost for nearly everybody in the ecosystem as well. Romain, sorry, did you?
Yeah, I mean, I would just support what has been said. Like what we see on the publisher side is basically like more direct type of transaction. So more than programmatic guaranteed, I would talk about programmatic direct. Basically, 2017 saw a huge run for quality. And so quality means more transparency on the fee, more transparency for brand safety. And so what we see today as a platform is basically the open market is done, is mature, and where the growth will happen will be on the programmatic direct type of transaction. So yeah, it's really where we are focusing our effort and where we see the growth.
And I think 2017, early 2017 saw just a lot of clamour in the press around a number of issues in terms of brand safety or brand content. Obviously, we've had a recent issue with Facebook. We are not going to talk about the Facebook thing on this panel. That was one rule. But I guess we also have seen some good response from the industry. And one of the things is, I referenced this in a piece I wrote recently. A year ago, Oath didn't exist. It came together. A year ago, ads.txt didn't exist. And actually now, it's in the market. You know, it launched in May or June. I can never remember the exact date. That, for me, has been a really good step, along with some other transparency efforts, for the industry to police itself a little better, to clean itself up a little more. I guess, what are the impacts you've seen from ads.txt adoption across each side, and some of the things that come with supply path optimization and giving that control to buyers? We're seeing, as an example, DSPs start to make the selection to only listen to authorized supply or make that a toggleable option for a buyer. So if I could come to you first.
Yeah, sure. So I think ad.txt for us, for buyers, it's all about choice. Essentially, we are getting now inventory that is bucketed into whether it's sold directly, whether it's sold resold, or whether it's unknown. And obviously, there is this 4-bucket unauthorized, which we are blocking, so we don't really have to worry about that. But I think what it means to buyers is that we can further evaluate what do we want to buy and how much this inventory is actually worth to us, which is fantastic. And before I came on this panel, I actually did, I checked in our system the adoption of ad.txt, and I compared UK to Germany. UK is slightly ahead in terms of adopting ad.txt. But what's interesting, and Germany, there is still a little bit, a little room to improve that. But what's interesting is that the amount of blocked unauthorized traffic in Germany, it's much higher than it is in the UK. And so what that means is that if the adoption of ad.txt was greater in Germany, the number of unauthorized traffic probably would be greater too. Mm-hmm. And I suppose what I'm trying to say is that for all those publishers that haven't necessarily adopted that solution or initiative just yet, their inventory might be currently resold and they may not even know about it. So I think ad.txt is brilliant. It's a simple solution and it's easy to adopt. And we are really happy to be part of it and driving it from the very start.
And then I guess, Romain and David, from a publisher and from a platform perspective, what are you seeing the impact there? Are you seeing it change the way you're working with publishers? Or behaving as a publisher?
I think most of the major publishers have adopted it. We see on our platform something like 80% or more adoption. So it's like pretty broadly adopted. Then from our perspective, the take we made very early in Q4 last year was to basically remove all all ad opportunities that were not authorized through ads.txt. And I think it was a great opportunity to, kind of clean up the supply chain. So, I mean, we are definitely supporting the initiative, and still, like, it's not a fully mature initiative, so we think there could be some improvement done on the ads.txt. But yeah, it's to be continued, basically.
I agree with everything that's been said.
You're not allowed to say that. We said you're not.
Okay, I disagree with everything that's been said. No, the ads.txt is a simple execution, as you've all alluded to. And it's one of the best things we've done in recent years in our market to solve what is a huge problem, fraudulent, unverified traffic that isn't what it says it is. So for a publisher, it's very simple to execute, and I'd please ask any publishers in the room, get home or get into the office and get this implemented as soon as possible, because you are effectively, as you heard from Ilona here, preventing money hitting your website through programmatic pipes, and you're also supporting fraudulent advertisers to make money out there. And any buyer out there, please buy verified traffic as well, because you're going against the efforts of our marketplace solving a problem that we all have. So it is a fantastic initiative, and I just beg everybody in every country out there to get behind it.
I can share an anecdote. In November of last year, so we moved probably 100% of our publishers to ads.txt almost immediately. It was a huge, huge effort internally. We saw video CPMs averaging, sort of a certain price, and we saw probably a 45% increase in video CPMs almost to the week that ads.txt was put in place. That wasn't because people suddenly started paying more for video. It was because all of the fraud had been removed from the video marketplace. We saw a lot of exchanges where revenue went down and their overall share of voice went down, which meant that they were just allowing this to proliferate in their exchange. They knew about it. They knew the money was coming in. They knew the money was going to nefarious sellers, but still they did nothing about it until ads.txt came along and instituted the accountability. So we just thought it was an amazing initiative for that reason.
So I'm going to put the pressure on Ryan now, because it feels like time for a mean question. Speaking just not as Essence, to give you a little get out, but speaking as the agency on the panel, do you think the agency should be buying unauthorized supply now? Do we think by the end of this half of the year that people will be buying unauthorized supply, and everyone else is going to vote on it afterwards as well?
I get the impression there's a correct answer to that question.
There isn't. There are arguments either side.
I'd love to disagree, but I generally have to agree with everything that's been said so far. Ads.txt has been hugely progressive as an industry. I'll try to give a bit of more of a buyer's angle to the topic. It's been hugely enlightening in the insights that we can generate after the fact in terms of pulling the TXT files and then reverse engineer how we are buying inventory and then make decisions off the back of that. What I'm more interested in going forward is how do we make these insights more actionable in an auction environment. Now, whether ads.cert is the answer to that, time will tell. But in terms of the conversations that we have with the DSPs we work with, including the trade desk, we're getting to a place where we can now start to make decisions based on the information we're getting, things at like an exchange level. I'm really keen to see how we get this down to an auction level, because that's where I think the tremendous value will be created.
And I think Romain spoke to the fact that it's only version 1, right? Ads.txt exists as version 1.1. Ads.cert will come, and is a very significant advancement for a publisher being able to say, not only I am the authorized seller, but this is what I have passed to you. So we feel ads.cert sounds like a good thing, right? I guess what's the barrier to ads.cert, and as we move forward with that from a publisher perspective? Romain's going.
Yeah, I mean, like we hope for ads.cert to happen. I think like one of the barriers is that basically it would really bring a level of transparency on the supply chain that has never been achieved before. And I think moving all the major players on the market on this specific topic will be challenging. So again, like I think we plan to talk a little bit about transparency. Like the way the supply chain is working is definitely not transparent. Adserver would solve this problem quickly.
And as incentive to, I mean, I'm just going to jump back to a piece of research that the IAB did recently, which is attitudes towards programmatic. I recommend everyone have a little look at that because the results were fascinating. But there are people reluctant in our industry to give full transparency, especially around fees. And we had in there a statistic saying 40% of the clients that we all work with see transparency or the lack of transparency in fees as a barrier to investment. So if we became more transparent, surely it means that the money that people are certainly making from being with the lack of transparency will be, substituted with more investment. And it's one of those, I want to hold on to this pot of cash over here, but there is another bigger pot of cash if we can clean up.
I'd agree with that.
Argument with you.
There's absolutely no reason not to put that level of transparency into the supply chain. I mean, 2017, we always refer to it as the year of accountability. So there was ads.text, there was first price auctions. There's just fewer and fewer places for people to hide. And ads.cert it completely moves the industry further along that path. I can understand that publishers may not want to disclose their fees to their buyers, but they should at least have the option to do so. And we've always been happy to share our log level data with either our sellers or our buyers. And we've always been happy that our buyers and sellers can come together and have a coffee while they look over our log level data, just to make sure that everything we say is happening in the auction is actually happening. So there's absolutely no reason why that can't proliferate on an industry-wide basis.
And so I want to come back to first price auctions in a little sec, but I just want to move on to data first. So I think, how are we seeing data enrich and drive this growth that we're seeing on this marketplace? And so coming to Christine, first of all. What for you is the impacts you're seeing across Europe?
Well, I think the one thing to keep in mind, we've spent 20 minutes talking about how incredibly complex this ecosystem is. And you have to imagine data adds just another layer on top of that complexity. So what we see pretty much in all markets across the globe is the maturity of the market says a lot about how much data is activated and used in marketing plans and strategies. So what we're seeing, for example, for this is obviously there's tons of ways that inventory is getting sectioned off and partitioned off. And so what we're trying to do is we spend a lot of time looking at how do we take the high quality data sets and make those more scalable to be able to actually deliver on campaigns. Because the more, obviously, as we all know, we've all spent years doing this, the more the inventory, the available inventory to book on decreases, the more difficult it is to find those users that you're trying to target from audience segmentation. So what we've been looking at doing is, well, not looking at doing, what we're currently launching is vertical-based brand data alliances that we will make available through all the major buying platforms. So at the moment, those are all launching in the UK. So primarily around auto and travel for the time being. Because we have to look at, it's not only about how much data we have, it's always about also how much data can we provide to you or to you or to you on those platforms and find those users again. So I think all the initiatives are great. It just, in terms of the data, that adds another layer of complexity. And for us, transparency is we're in exactly the same boat. So I think it's a good space for data right now, mainly because the markets are more mature. The understanding of it is very, is much better than it was a few years ago. And we're seeing people, for example, get much smarter about the technologies they're using and how they analyze and fit data into that. So, finally, after, what has it been, maybe like 5 years, I can say that people are starting to get smart about how they use DMPs and actually layering, looking at audiences and how that matches up to their own data, creating models out of seed data, using external data sets, a lot of interesting things going on. So that's
Excellent.
where we sit.
And David, how are you seeing that in a publisher side? So in terms of activating that data, are you seeing more demand for your data being driven through the programmatic landscape now?
Yeah, absolutely. Programmatic and the direct landscape. But again, we're trying to transition to a place where everything is done programmatically if technology in the industry enables us to. But what we have seen in mainly more of the advanced markets, so Western Europe, US, and Australia as well actually, is a thirst for data partnerships. So our first party data becoming people's second party data, and likewise, and building lookalike models off those kind of combined data sets as well. That brings a lot more complexity about executing data because there's various data protection things we've got to get around or find that work for both parties, but it's quite an exciting place. And as we said, with various advancements as well, programmatic guarantee with audience lists, enabling buyers to utilize data which Essence do quite frequently in a guaranteed environment is certainly bringing added efficiency. So what we've seen is a decrease in the third-party data usage and an increase in first-party lookalike models or second-party lookalike models.
Yeah, and so publisher data as second-party data for an advertiser.
Exactly,
Always
depending which
again.
side you're looking at it from, yes.
And I guess that brings the dreaded 4 letters that we should just reference in this context. Obviously, we're not very long away from a major regulatory event. With GDPR coming, I guess, just some news I saw on the way out yesterday, factual, a data provider in the space are going to rebuild all their data segments from scratch, right? They believe their consumers are buying it, they believe their publisher partners are gaining consent effectively, but they're going to rebuild from scratch every data set they have. What do we feel not the impact of GDPR, but I guess I think GDPR is something that leads to the need for everyone to come together. I think we've seen that with ads.txt. And so I think there's an interesting thing is how you guys, are any of you guys engaged with the IAB consent framework, or any of you trying to drive through that as a sort of industry standard to try and find a 6? I'll declare an oath position that we are supporting that framework, and we're working hard with other people in the industry to do it. I think it's a good thing. But I'm interested to see, probably I'll start with you, James, if you don't mind on this one.
Yeah, sure. I think so. Index is absolutely supporting the IAB consent framework. We are architecting our system in a way that I can support that or other frameworks. So we're really kind of leaving the choice up to the publishers, but we're gently nudging people in that direction because, as you say, it kind of makes sense for the whole industry to come together around that. You know, the other really key piece of that, and another example of the industry coming together, is around identity, right? And identity is now at the core of data, of ad targeting, and more than ever under the sort of auspices of GDPR, it becomes more important. So as we all know in the industry, Google, Facebook, Amazon have a huge, huge advantage over everybody else because of identity. There may even be a 4th player in that game these days whose name may or may not start with O and end with TH, that will also have and has developed a massive, massive footprint in identity. But what we're seeing is through the identity consortium that we're a part of, along with AppNexus and LiveRamp and others, is that there is an identity mechanism for everyone else. Right? In the trade desk parlance, it manifests itself as adserver.org. With Merkle, it manifests itself as M1. But nonetheless, this is a common identity mechanism that the rest of the industry can leverage. I think it's going to go further toward cleaning up the fraud problem. I think it's going to go further toward advancing the efficacy of data. All of the things that we've talked about today that are driving adoption of programmatic and some of the things that are holding it back, many of them can be solved with identity. And so I think that these two things, you can't say GDPR without saying identity in the same sentence.
And I think the exciting thing about identity is as the platforms come together and collaborate effectively, it creates opportunities for publishers and data cooperatives and advertisers and data cooperatives as well. And I think that actually may represent a good challenge to that walled garden perspective. I guess anything from you on this, right? Oh, Romain.
Sure. I mean, David referenced our approach to use of data combined with inventory a little bit earlier on. For me personally, I'm quite excited for GDPR in the sense that I expect it will clean up the ecosystem somewhat. One thing that we are constantly doing is testing the efficacy, both in terms of accuracy and effectiveness, of all of the data segments that we use. And we actually create that as an output for our clients, that we score them on is this audience who we think it is, and B, is it effective for our objectives? So having a much cleaned up ecosystem where I'm expecting some consolidation is hugely exciting for us because it kind of plays in the direction that we've been trying to move for years now.
Caught me, unfortunately, drinking some water. So let's come back to header bidding and how that's changing just also. I think, David, you referenced a desire to sell everything programmatically where you could, where it was supported well. Is header bidding that solution? Is that being effective for people on the panel, or what opportunities and challenges has it thrown up?
We didn't enter into header bidding, funny enough, and various people on this panel know the reasons why, the challenges that header bidding brought up, but what we did do is wait for server-side solutions. We felt that header bidding, at the heart of the header bidding solution, was a good idea, a good reason, and the opportunities and the greater choice it offers buyers to access publisher data through technologies they want to buy through because it makes sense for their client at that current time. It was all right, but we felt that the execution 2 years ago, maybe about that time, wasn't quite right for our company, a global organization, due to latency and data issues, and also actually developing that work knowing that there is another solution around the corner. But we have launched exchange bidding dynamic allocation, and actually with various partners, including Index as well. So far, the results are strong. But whether that is going to result in what can be automated, will be automated, is another question. I think there are various other things we need to do within our industry, such as mainly being education, transparency on fees. Header bidding isn't that, or exchange bidding, or server-side solutions isn't that solution that's going to result, oh, everything's going to go programmatic. A huge amount of education needs to be delivered globally, greater transparency on fees, to increase that appetite to shift what should be executed through programmatic, whether it's TV one day, or digital audio, and even digital buys around content executions as well. That should all be going through programmatic pipes. And
so what excites anyone on the panel about the remainder of this year? We're going to ignore GDPR now. We talked about it. It's good. It's done. It's to the side. It's all going to be fine. What's exciting when we get beyond that event that's dominated a lot of conversations over the last 6 months, right? What are people excited about developments in the second half of this year, but also for 2019? And I think David and Ryan, you've both talked about using programmatic guaranteed or automated guaranteed, or whichever name we use to describe that. Where do you see the next big growth opportunities? Is it something like connected TV? Is it something like out of home? What's audio? And there was some big news with Adserver being bought by Pandora a couple of weeks ago. What's the exciting thing that we're all going to be talking about on these panels next year when it's no longer GDPR?
I would actually like to challenge programmatic guaranteed, first of all, as a con. Here we go. It's been very progressive for us. It's brought some big benefits, such as things like being able to frequency cap across a number of line items, which we previously couldn't. At the same time, I'm a very firm believer that not all impressions are created equal. So paying the same price for every impression seems a little bit counterintuitive. And it's also pretty clear from working in programmatic guarantee that it's not necessarily less laborious, and nor does it guarantee brand safety 100%. So my kind of question here is programmatic guarantee truly programmatic?
Or truly guaranteed?
And I suppose I will agree with Ryan. I think from our perspective, programmatic guaranteed is great for advertisers that are trying to start running programmatic. But is it really programmatic? I feel like it's a great stepping stone into programmatic, but it's in between. It's not direct, but it's not fully programmatic because you don't have any control over what you're buying. And it's kind of going back to what I said earlier. In programmatic, it's all about control and choice. And I think with programmatic guaranteed, yet again, you are going to the publisher and say, hey, I want to secure in 3 weeks' time this amount of inventory. Can you give it to me? And you are paying the same price for every single impression. And I think the beauty about programmatic is that it gives you that control to evaluate everything in real time and make sure that you are paying what the value every user has for you.
I can see that Roman's itching to come back in.
Yeah, I mean, for us, so we provide both the Adserver and the SSP, so there is an obvious like convergence here and programmatic guaranteed make a lot of sense, then I think, so we started in Q1 executing some programmatic guaranteed, like guaranteed volume deals through RTBs, and we saw an adoption among just a few publishers with beta test that was tremendous, and it worked. I think there is still a piece to crack, which is about the sync with the demand on the data set. Because the reason why people will move to programmatic guaranteed is to secure some inventory that they want to have. The next step, from our perspective, is basically to help the buyers to leverage their own data asset, sync this data with our SSP, and then execute the programmatic guaranteed trade through the RTB pipes. And I don't know when it will come, because we are ready. I don't know if the demand is, but I think there is an exciting movement here.
So I just want to add one more thing. I agree. Programmatic guaranteed, should it be called that? Maybe it's automated guaranteed. And actually, most automated guaranteed or programmatic guaranteed solutions out there available to both buy side and sell side are still in beta. And there's still a huge amount of development we need to do. I mean, for example, for an advertiser, you want the ability to pass back inventory from an impression that from a user that you've already spoken to. So global frequency capping across all areas of buying, which I think will be in a pipeline this year. And there's many other developments that need to happen. Again, there is an issue. I mean, I've been working in the industry since 2010 or in a programmatic space, and back then we said what can be automated will be automated. Technology still hasn't delivered that promise. So there's still a lot of work to do. Hopefully we'll get a little bit closer to that promise by the end of this year.
There's a lot of misnomers in there and almost oxymorons, right? Because programmatic guaranteed is not guaranteed. It's not programmatic because for the most part, you're just really pushing through an API into the ad server, and the ad server is still making the decision. So it's slightly more automated than the old school way of faxing in an insertion order. But it's effectively still based on a contract that buyer and seller sign, and that the buyer agrees to buy those impressions no matter what else might happen, and the seller agrees to sell them no matter what else might happen. But that, to me, is not putting buyers in control. It's not giving publishers choice, and so it almost undermines the fundamental tenets of what is driving programmatic adoption in the first place. But you know, that said, if buyers and sellers want to agree on a rate, they don't want that to compete in the open market, and the buyers are willing to say, yes, no matter what happens, I will buy these impressions and I will pay you for them, then there's no reason why they can't do that through DSPs and SSP platforms. There's no need for the ad server.
And I think there's an interesting question, a little bit to Ryan's original challenge, right? If we move to a first price world, if we move to a certified or so an ads.cert or a ads.text world, Romain controversially said that the open auction is done, and I think you mean mature rather than over, right? But actually, does the auction become the right mechanic for delivering all of these things? Actually, do we get to the point where that audience evaluation is effective, and you know the price you will pay, and then you can evaluate what you're willing to pay, and you bid and you pay that price? That's an interesting challenge with some of the changes we're seeing to auction dynamics.
Well, the auction still drives, it's the marketplace that will dictate the price, right? And it's the open market that will dictate in any given millisecond in time what that impression is worth, because it's worth as much as bidders are willing to bid on it and pay for it. So the move to first price auctions, I think, was a natural evolution. And as you said, the world is so convoluted. There's so many different auctions happening, and the only auction that really matters is the auction within the publisher's ad server, right? And that's a first price auction. So as a buyer, they need to bid the way they truthfully value that inventory, and as a platform, we need to move that bid into the publisher's ad server, where the ad server can stack rank it against everything else that's running. So in that paradigm, it's really first price auctions were the only way to go. Second price auctions were allowing too many nefarious actors to hide fees and hide different things within the auction mechanism, to not truly prioritize impressions the way that the buyer and seller wanted them to be prioritized. So I think that we probably will never go back from the first price auction unless we all agree to use one common platform, and that's never going to happen.
I think it's worth saying there are mixed models still in play, right? So some exchanges are still entirely second price, some are not. We're still in that evolutionary stage. I don't disagree with you, but I think first price is an interesting way in terms of price discovery and actually whether you need some of those guaranteed options. One of the interesting things about programmatic is, for those who have been doing it since 2010 or 11 or 12, we always started talking about the algorithm and how it would make these perfect decisions and about game theory and auction and mechanics. And the thing that often stuffs that up is human behavior. But that leads me on to a really interesting question is, what's the opportunity for humans in this programmatic world, right? So where can humans make the difference? We've got about 5 minutes left, so if everyone can have an optimistic view of how humans are going to make the difference in a programmatic world, starting with Ryan.
Great. You also asked the question, what is the most exciting thing for 2018? I think this is also it for me, unleashing the machines. The direction that we are finding success in is moving towards fewer, bigger, better. If I think about how we run campaigns, the fewer the line items is proving to be more effective. And where the value as humans, I find, is created is by understanding what makes a good impression so we can assign a correct value. So we look for particular signals. For example, viewability is one of them. And based on that, we're able to score what impressions are good and build programmable bidders. So we are using the technology to be automated, but we are telling it what to go out and hunt for, which impressions are the right ones, what is the right audiences to be speaking to, go out and find more impressions such as that, and we're going to try to remove our bias, aside from saying what the correct outcomes are. Now, there's another area that plays into this that we haven't actually touched on yet, and that's creative. So there's the data, there's the inventory side of things, which is hugely exciting. But ultimately, we have to be mindful that we are speaking to human beings at the end of the day, and creative is the mechanism for how we do so. So I'm also very excited to see how data-driven creative intertwines with how we score and classify these impressions to ultimately create a more compelling advertising experience, both for brands and for users.
Yeah, I will pick up one thing you said and push it to the publisher side. Like the great opportunity and what I am very optimistic about is that the technology is like finally open and available for publishers to do their own things. And the big trend we see at the moment and where we think the market is heading is basically this type of publisher as a platform business, where publishers take back the control, manage all their different monetization channels within one environment that they can program, that they can actionate themselves. And so this really publisher as a platform business is really what we see happening in the incoming months.
Oh, fine for Roman. Fine for Roman.
Sorry.
James, for you.
Sorry, I was distracted by the ringing phone. So the most exciting thing, I think I said it earlier, for 2018 is going to be identity. Identity is something that the entire industry, once we get over the shock and horror of what happens on May 26th, and we start rubbing the sort of things from our eyes and the ashes start to clear, then the conversation has to be absolutely centered on identity. It's the only thing that will matter, and it's the only thing that will allow the strong, independent ecosystem to thrive, you know, in the valley of the giants, so to speak. And so, to me, that's the most exciting topic, and it's the only topic that that I think is going to be interesting.
So I think what we will be talking in 2018, it's going to be connected TV. I think that's going to be something that that's going to be big. And I think moving technology aside, I think even looking at us consumers, and from my own experience, I think I don't really watch linear TV anymore. Every TV, if I watch TV, it's usually through connected devices, apps, etc. So I think connected TV will be something that we will definitely talk more about. And I think we are starting to get into the place where we can obviously execute the connected TV over programmatically. We do it a lot in the States. Europe is next. We've run multiple campaigns here. And so we are very excited to see what will happen next.
I'm just going to bring it back to the human question. Do we have a place in this automated world. I believe humans are at the heart of automation in this. What we found, a global organization working in multiple countries, there are many buying points. Actually, the buying points are becoming far more fragmented than ever, with various clients taking activity in-house, DSPs helping clients with activation, or moving from trading desk models to agency models with programmatic buying. We struggled initially to find all areas of the ecosystem to find an inventory discovery tool that works. Currently, inventory discovery isn't automated, truly automated, and that makes it hard to really shift programmatic buying into programmatic direct models, which we all believe is the growth area. So we found that every frontline salesperson or any person who in our organization who has a client-facing kind of position needs to know about programmatic and needs to have that conversation, understand that it's just about getting an ad from A to B in front of the right user, right time, right place, and all this. And it's simple, despite all the complex things we've discussed. The outcome is the important thing for the advertiser at the end of the day. So humans are at the heart of automation, and they are our inventory discovery tool.
Excellent. And Kristina?
I'll just make 2 quick points. One on the 2018 and that 4-letter acronym. I actually think it's going to be great, specifically for the data space, because we're already seeing a lot of consolidation. We're seeing people drop out who can't really say where their data is coming from, give transparency about segmentation and things like that. And so I think for GDPR for data is really going to have a great impact coming up in this year. And in terms of the human side, I've been in the industry since '98, and I feel like it's always about the machine, but the reality is these platforms do not run themselves. There will always be a space for humans. And those unsung ops heroes that are in the basement of every single company never see the light of day. I mean, those are the people who need to know how to run these platforms and how they communicate with each other and troubleshoot and fix. And then also, just picking up on the client side, can't forget, we will always need humans to be the translator between us as an industry and the end client with the people with the dollars in their pockets. And that can only be done by a human.
I think all of those, without a doubt, there's a very clear role for humans. And I think it's tremendously exciting where we've been as an industry. We're out of time. I think we could probably talk on some of these topics for about another 45 minutes. So I want to be a little bit respectful of time. I want to thank everybody on the panel. But I also want everyone to leave, actually, I hope optimistically from this panel, right? We've seen a lot of good talk around changes that have been made over the course of 17 and the start of 18 that are improving the supply chain quality, improving transparency. There are solutions in play to improve how we work in that programmatic space. And I think that's happening globally and happening differently in different markets. But I think there's just still tremendous growth for everyone in the room and on the panel, and tremendous learning. And that, for me, is the most exciting thing. There's still stuff we don't know that we can discover and improve. So with that, thank you. Thank you, everyone on the panel, and thank you guys for listening.